Join me today as we talk about the 1979 disaster movie, Meteor. This is the Geek Cabal channel. My name's Bobbie, and today we're going to be talking about a disaster movie from the 70s. For those of you who are unaware of this particular aspect of the history of cinema, the decade of the 70s saw a lot of disaster movies. It was kind of a thing. This is when you had movies like Earthquake. I think The Towering Inferno is from the 70s, if I recall correctly. I want to say The Poseidon Adventure, but that could actually be the late 60s. I think it's in the 70s, though. I know that the sequel is I don't remember what it's called right off the top of my head, but yes, there is a sequel to The Poseidon Adventure. And then you had the movie Airport, and I think it had a few sequels. If you've ever seen the movie Airplane, yes, the comedy, it's mocking all these disaster movies. In specific, it's going after the movie Airport. I actually watched the regular version and one of its sequels one night. And I was like, this is basically just like an unfunny version of Airplane. And then it all clicked that, like, well, this has to be the movie Airplane is mocking in primary. So, yeah, lots of disaster movies in the 70s. So, yeah, this was one of them. I saw it on Amazon Prime. I was like, wait a minute. It's a Sean Connery movie about meteors from the 70s? I've got to check this one out. I had not seen it until just a couple days ago when I watched it. And oddly enough, I actually watched another meteor, well, it's a comet in that one, movie that I think was also came out in 1979 or 78, and it was a TV movie. I haven't done a video on it yet, but I'm going to. I also watched it for the first time. Probably why Amazon Prime was like, hey, why don't you check out Meteor? So anyway, who's in this thing? Well, as I mentioned, Sean Connery. He plays, he's the main character. He's a scientist who developed the Hercules space platform that was meant to be, it's loaded with nuclear missiles and is meant to be a defense against an incoming asteroid, for instance, or a meteor. And then it got co-opted, and the government's like, well, this is a great thing, let's build it. Only we're going to aim the missiles down at the Soviet Union. So there's a lot of Cold War stuff going on in this movie, too. We have Henry Fonda as the president. Martin Landau is the military guy who's in charge of the Hercules project. Richard Dysart plays the Secretary of Defense. Now, I don't know if you recognize him name-wise, but he is the doctor in the movie The Thing. The one who gets it whenever he's doing CPR on the guy and his chest suddenly opens up into a tooth-filled maw and takes his hands. Then we have Brian Keith, who plays the Russian physicist, who had just an endless number of TV credits. But the one that stood out to me was he apparently did the voice of Uncle Ben in the 90s Spider-Man cartoon series. And then Natalie Wood as the Russian interpreter, and there's other people as well, but these are the names that all kind of stuck out. So yeah, so that's who we've got in this. So what's it all about? Well, essentially, there's a meteor on track to collide with the Earth, and it starts off as a maybe it will hit, and that changes into a it will hit. So they need to get Sean Connery's character, because he designed the Hercules system. They bring him in, and he's all pissed off because they turned it into a weapons platform. I mean, it was always theoretically a weapons platform, but turned it into a potential weapons platform to use against the Soviets. And so they tell him what's happened. They show him that one of the space missions, the people were close to a comet, I believe, that had been previously unknown. So it had been making its trip through the solar system in such a way that humans had never observed it. So it's a real long cycle. and they happened to be close to where it was going to be, so they went in for an examination, but then it hit another celestial body, another rock, and the resulting explosion created an asteroid making a beeline towards Earth and destroyed the spacecraft. So, once they're sure that it's going to hit, and they know the size of it, it's 5 miles wide. So they have a discussion at the White House. I think it's at the White House. It's there in D.C. anyway. And Sean Connery is trying to impress upon them the level of devastation this is going to cause. And essentially, it's going to kill everyone. So he tries to convey this. They don't believe him. They start bickering. And the main point of contention is the Hercules project has been kept a secret. The Soviets don't know about it, or at least publicly the United States never announced it, and it violates several treaties. So they're concerned with, well, this is going to look bad. And Sean Connery finally just gets up and walks out, and they're like, where are you going? He goes, I'm going to the bar across the street. If you guys want to have an actual serious conversation, that's where you can find me. And that was great. So you've got, Martin Landau's character is essentially supposed to be the military hardliner who's like, oh, we can't let the Soviets know about this. And it's kind of like, well, okay, so your choices are the Soviets know about it, or they don't know about it, and everyone is doomed. It's like, this is actually a really easy choice here. And finally it comes down to Henry Fonda's character as the president. They impress upon him what's going to happen, and he's like, all right, well, I'm going to address the nation at 8 o'clock. And because these guys are going to New York City, which is where the command center for Hercules is, which I don't actually understand why it's in New York City, but whatever. So you would think it'd be outside of a major metropolitan area. So they're en route, and they watch on TV as the president goes on TV and says that, yes, we in fact have an orbital platform loaded with nuclear missiles that we built with the intention of stopping a rogue asteroid, which we now have coming towards us. And so fortunately, we already have this thing in place that we only built for peaceful purposes. And it just really spins it. But the other thing that came up is they realized they were going to be short on the number of missiles and megatonnage they were going to need to shift the path of this asteroid. So they realize, I think it's Sean Connery's character, has to ask the president, like, so I know there's things you can and can't tell me, but can you answer me this one question with a yes or no? Do the Soviets have a comparable system up there? And he's just like, yes. And so they know they're going to need to have the cooperation of the Soviets. So the president spins it, also goes on to say that, and fortunately, the Soviets also in their foresight built a similar system, and now we're going to be asking them for their help. And so then they put in a call to the Soviets, and you see the premier and everyone else there, the Soviets watching it, and the one guy's just like, it says something to the effect of that he has a superpower to spin anything into something productive, because they know obviously he's lying, because obviously they built theirs for the same reason, to have as a weapon against the West. So they send their physicist, and he's not allowed to admit to anything, and the U.S. isn't going to do anything until they admit that theirs actually exists. So he's there for a little while. He sees Martin Landau's character just have a meltdown over something, and Sean Connery been talking to him like, well, in the realm of the hypothetical, let's say you did have this thing, and starts asking a bunch of hypothetical questions, and his interpreter has to go back and forth, and finally, he's like, well, if I would have designed it, it would have this on it. And so Sean Connery's like, so then in theory, if you would have designed it, if it was up there, then we have the missiles that we need collectively. And he's like, theoretically. So, you know, it's someone who grasps the problem, who's working within the confines of his government, you know, saying that, yeah, it's there. Yes, it can do what we need it to do. Yes, we need to work together. He's like, I understand this, but just like you, I have to deal with stupid politicians. And so he eventually puts in a call to Moscow once he realizes how things are on the American end. And then the Russians have their big press conference where they announce that, yes, this purely defensive measure that we built, just like the Americans, and now we were going to engage in global cooperation. So, you know, like a number of Cold War movies, you have this scenario where something dire is on the line and two just die-hard enemies have to work together. And so that's what it comes down to. And so they have to align their platforms and sync them up and the missiles and everything. And so the president finally asked him, like, so guys, even if we get all this to work, like, what are the odds this is actually going to stop the asteroid? They have to tell him, like, well, we don't know. Like, this is a matter of math. Plus, once the missiles fire, they're no longer under our control. Like, they're going to do whatever they're going to do, and hopefully they're going to function the way we hope they function. But we have an excess number of them, so we have a buffer, you know, of some can malfunction, and some do. But also, they're racing the fact that they're only trying to stop the main asteroid. The collision also created a bunch of little bits and pieces that are going to come to Earth. And so as the movie is progressing, you see areas are hit and, you know, tons of collateral damage, with the final one is going to be coming to New York. And one of the observatories warns them of this, and they're trying to convince them to use the missiles to stop that, because they're like, well, if the timing's off, it's going to hit New York and destroy the command center. And so Sean Connery's like, no, we can't risk that. Like, this is the planet versus us. Like, if New York's the sacrifice, then that sucks, but so be it. Like, we have to save the human race here. And so they're able to fire the missiles before impact there in New York. And then a lot of the surface is devastated in New York. And they have to get out of the command center because a lot of rubble falls and some people do die. And then they got to go through a bunch of muck because some water busting through the walls underground in the subway tunnels, and then they make it out. And but afterwards, like, they hear on the radio that it was successful, that it destroyed the asteroid. And the Russian physicist, they're sitting there all covered in muck, and he's telling Sean Connery, well, you should come to Moscow one of these days. I'll show you a clean subway system. And he's like, I just might take you up on that. And there's some back and forth, you know, about you know, which city's better. Like, Sean Connery's hitting on the interpreter through most of the movie, and trying to convince her to stay in the U.S. once this is all over. And he's like, oh yeah, you can stay here. We've got it all. Like, crime, dirty cities, race riots. We've got everything. It's, you know, it's kind of funny. But yeah, no, it's a good movie. And, you know, there's character moments, like talking to her about how she became the interpreter and how that led to her basically getting a degree. You know, she's also a physicist, so came about from having to be around him and the Russian physicist. And you know, the fact he's had several ex-wives at this point, and you know, there's a lot of little personal moments in there. But essentially, this movie is like, it attempts to be, like, I think Armageddon probably borrowed a lot from this movie. Even though this movie's trying to be more like Deep Impact than Armageddon. And, but with like 1979 special effects. And I don't mean from Star Wars. I mean from like the Forbidden Planet or something. So, the special effects, I would not call them great, but again, it's from 1979. You know, it is what it is. But yeah, this is basically like a late 70s Armageddon, but smarter, you know, I guess, because we're not sending a team of oil rig workers up to try to mine the asteroid and put nukes inside of it. it's a lot, like I said, it's more like Deep Impact in that regard, but with the like all the rando asteroid strikes in Armageddon. So I could see where the directors or the creators of both those movies possibly took inspiration from this movie. I'm guessing at the same time because those two movies came out the same year. But and like I said, you got your Cold War theatrics. Will the Russians and the U.S. cooperate? And both sides are hedging their bets, and we don't want to. They've got warmongers, but don't tell them this, and you can't tell them that, and you got the people in the middle that understand the problem. They're like, look, guys, this is all fun and good, but like, human race is on the line. Like, we'll worry about communism versus capitalism later. But yeah, it's an entertaining movie. It's a movie from the '70s, so it's got certain filmmaking conceits that movies in the '70s had, and like I said, the effects a little questionable, but overall I thought it was pretty good. Surprised I'd never seen it before. Like, I think I've seen part of it before, because whenever they were in the subway and all of a sudden like the water started pouring in and everything, that looked familiar. But I could also be confusing that with a scene from the movie Earthquake, because I think something similar happens there, and I know I've seen Earthquake. So, anyway, if you want to see Sean Connery as a scientist trying to save the world amidst the Cold War hysteria, like, this is the movie for you. I didn't see anything objectionable as far as kids watching it. There's no language, there's no violence. There's only tiny amounts of blood. And that's like whenever one of the meteor strikes some of the bodies, but that's nothing at all. So, and I happen to watch this on Prime, but looking it up on the IMDb as of right now, it's also on. I think it said it's also on Tubi and Peacock, maybe. So if you're not going to watch it on Prime, check it out there. If you do want to check it out on Prime, have a link down in the description. I would. As with the other things, obviously make sure it's on Prime. If you're not a current Prime member, make sure it's on Prime before you go that way. And it's probably not worth getting Prime just for this. I mean, like I said, it's on the other things. I mean, there's a lot of movies on Prime though, so that's why I throw it out there. But yeah, so that's about all I've got to say on that one. Like I said, I thought it was decent. Probably. Oh. I mean, I hate to dock movies because they're older movies, but, effects have come a long way since then, and that does impact things. No pun intended for an asteroid movie. Or, sorry, a meteor movie. That's the damn title. I should remember that. Probably 6.5, 7, somewhere in there. Entertaining, worth a watch. Definitely a lot shorter than the other... than the comet movie I'm going to be talking about in a video in the near future, A Fire in the Sky. That was like a 2.5 hour long movie, and that was a TV movie. But anyway, that's all I've got to say about that. So let me know down in the comments, have you seen this movie before? Are you going to check this movie out? Is Sean Connery enough of a pull to check this movie out? Maybe Henry Fonda? I don't know. If you've seen it before, let me know what you thought about it. If you do end up watching it as a result of this, please come back and comment. Let me know what you thought about it. But other than that, like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Sharing and commenting help us grow the channel. We always appreciate that. And, for those of you who aren't subscribers, we always appreciate that if you join us. If not, understandable. And if you have been with us all, sticking with us, we always appreciate that. And I hope you stick with us till the end of whatever this crazy trip is. But, yeah. That's all I've got to say, so I guess see you next time.